The Project. Kuwait. Learn. Live.
Thank you for joining us again today. We wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the hormonal changes that we kind of briefed in the last episode. But the reason why I wanted to have you back on to talk a little bit more about that and a little bit more on the sleep and caffeine issues related to food choices. Some of it comes from personal experience living in Kuwait. There was a point where I was drinking about 10 cups of coffee a day.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, start up in the morning, you make yourself a pot of coffee, then all day you're in meetings. The social life and entertainment is all around, cafes and coffee shops. And before I knew it, I was at a point where caffeine was just, hardly even making an impact, I felt, for what it's supposed to do. And then just how it also kind of leads to some poor food choices when you struggle to sleep, you rely on the caffeine and just what that does.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a lifestyle thing that I don't know if it's because of the caffeine that people are up later, but the late nights are very common for a lot of people. They run on like 4 to 5 hours of sleep. Around holiday times, that gets pretty typical just because there's a lot of family obligations, a lot of social obligations. But I think the mentality, especially with a lot of younger clients that I've had in Kuwait, is that they think that 4 to 5 hours of sleep is okay and enough. And then just, all these caffeine options that they have, for social life or, just daily fuel, I think to kind of help combat that seems to be the trend. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit.
All this and more in today's episode.
So what are your thoughts on it?
Those are a lot of thoughts. So
let's start with backtracking off of the first episode and a little bit more on we talked about hormonal changes and neurological changes that happen. So what specifically is happening there?
Okay. In the last episode, for people who might be not remembering what we talked about, I was asked to come and speak about the addictive nature of some foods, specifically sugar and flours, and how even when people want to control their amount because they know they're gaining weight or they've got diabetes, they find that they really struggle with food choices, like picking the really super sugary, fatty foods over the more healthy choices. And that some of that has been engineered to be that way. Like it works very well for the food companies to make you have those kind of choices because you'll eat more than you normally would, and you'll eat the more expensive concoctions that are offered. And part of this is premised on the biology of our appetite and our satiation, like what satisfies us. Like when somebody says, I'm struggling with food, please, whoever's listening, it is by no means a problem with your willpower. It's got to do with the fact that either you have a vulnerability to specific foods so that you get caught quicker than somebody else, like somebody who might start smoking cigarettes finds that they're a smoker before somebody else who can, recreationally have a cigarette here and there. I don't know if that's an issue in Kuwait, but it certainly is a big issue. It's an issue.
Definitely is. Yeah. When I first got out there, they were smoking allowed, like in the malls and the hospitals and everything still. I think that's just been in the last few years where they've started to decrease that.
Yeah.
When we first opened the fitness facilities, we had people, passing out in the warm up because they just physically, there's just it was so hard for them, breathing and everything.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people. Yeah.
And some people are more prone or more quick to respond to the effects. Just like some people are more quick to gain weight, some people are more quick to respond to the effects of the addictiveness. But it's a body thing. It's a physiological reason that this is happening. And even on the point of view of, I talk about the addictive natures of food, even if we don't look at the addictive natures, just the amount of sugar and flour and, what we call the glycemic index, how quickly carbohydrates break down into sugar, so that breads and pasta and those kinds of things become sugar more quickly than vegetables like cauliflower and lettuce and Brussels sprouts. If they break down more quickly, then they have a stronger effect on the body. And so on the body part, it has to do with the insulin. So, the insulin spikes when you're eating a lot of flour and you're eating a lot of sugar. It actually dampens a bit if you add fat to it. But if you add the sugar to it, that it dampens it, but it's still there.
That's really important to understand because carbs get demonized a lot, but understanding that there's a big spectrum of, kind of smarter options or options that are going to give better information to your body, like you're saying.
Yeah, the thing when people talk about carbs, what they really mean when they're demonizing it is they mean the super simple refined carbs, because carbs like cauliflower and like vegetables basically, and even grains are complex and they take a while to break down. And that gives the body a chance to manage this big sugar load, this big energy load of sugar. And if the body has a chance to deal with it, I mean, it's like a raging fire. And if the body can handle it, has the time, and it doesn't have to handle it for too long, it can manage it, through the insulin. But if it's too much, it essentially burns out what we call the insulin receptors, and the person becomes insulin resistant. And so now you've got all this fuel in the form of sugar, and you can't do anything with it. You become diabetic. I mean, that's the sort of layman's definition of diabetes, is that you have sugar in the blood that can't get into the cells because you've essentially scorched the receptors, And now we have diabetes and the whole obesity that's associated with diabetes. Please, listeners, appreciate that we used to believe, at least in America, that eating fat made you fat. But in fact, it's sugar and refined sugar, not Brussels sprout sugar. Refined sugar makes you fat. And so for those people who want to eat plant-based, if they're eating complex carbs, it's fine to eat carbs. It really is. It's what we're talking about are the simple and the refined carbs. But anyway, when you've got all those refined sugar in the blood that can't get into the cells, that means that I'm going to be tired. It means I'm going to be fatigued. It means I'm going to want more sugar because I want fuel. So there's that aspect of diabetes. And then there's the other aspect, which is what's happening to all that sugar in the blood vessels? Well, it's damaging the body. I mean, that's all of the things that happen with diabetes. But it also gets stored into what we call visceral fat, or the obesity that's around the belly. And it's the type of obesity that we worry about that is skyrocketing across the world. That's causing what we call metabolic syndrome. I don't want to get too medical here, but these are all the conditions like high blood pressure and high cholesterol and diabetes and heart disease and death eventually, all because of this excess fuel that we weren't able to absorb and has basically damaged our body. So that's the effect of refined sugar on the body. It also has an effect in the brain. Got all the sugar in the brain, in the vessels of the brain. Although there's not actually a consensus on this yet, there are enough people talking in the field about how, all this excess sugar in the brain could even cause a condition like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So that's another, I guess, physical effect of sugar in the brain. But in the part that I was asked to speak about when I came a few weeks ago was to talk about the addictive nature of foods. And it also changes that whole neurology in the brain, our motivational neurology, the things that we do to, I do things because essentially it makes me feel good to do things. And I eat particular foods. I mean, if you're eating normally, Brussels sprouts and beets and carrots are delicious. If they're prepared in a nice way, they're absolutely delicious.
Yeah.
You can bring out the sugar in them. Like that kind of stuff, that kind of sugar is fine. And fruits, all good. And it's absolutely delicious. And that's because it wires up in our neurochemistry in the what we call the limbic system. Nucleus accumbens is the particular part of the brain that's affected. And it releases, bottom line, it releases a lot of dopamine. Dopamine is good. But the amount of dopamine that I get from roasted carrots is nice. It's nice. It's good. I like it. We had a good meal. But if I have a carrot drink with a lot of, probably more like some kind of refined sugar. I've taken the sugar out of the carrot or out of the beet or out of the sugar cane. Now it's just the sugar itself. That's far too much for my brain. And it essentially, I'm just going to be simplistic here and say it blasts the dopamine receptors there too. And so
that's something to be aware of when like things that are disguised as healthy. Like you're thinking this juice it's carrots. It's got to be good for me, but it's.
Yeah. Well, one of the things when you get more, like when you start to read more and more about this, most of us in the field, we pull our hair out when we see fruit juices and fruit drinks and pops. I mean, it's all sugar. It's just all sugar, and none of it is good. And, people will always say, does that mean, Dr. Tarman, you can't eat sugar or you can't eat fruit? And of course you can eat fruit, but you eat the fruit in the fruit, you're not with the extracted stuff taken out. It's the same. I know we're going to be talking about caffeine, but I mean, if we ate the caffeine beans or if we ate from where it came from, it probably wouldn't be as damaging as it is. It's the fact that we've taken the stuff out, exploded it into our body that can't handle that much. It's causing all this damage. devastation, neurological devastation. And in the brain, that's called addiction. And in the body, that's called various conditions like diabetes or heart disease.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You spoke a little bit about, it caught my attention when you said the Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Do you guys know exactly like what that link is? I know like sugar it definitely has an effect on it, but like, are there other lifestyle factors that make that more susceptible in somebody, or is that still too new in the area?
It's still too new. The only thing is like there's an association with the fact that you have a higher amount of blood sugar and the sort of typical findings that you see with those conditions, like with Alzheimer's, you have these neurofibrillary tangles. And it just seems that the more amount of sugar that there is in the blood of the person, the more likely they are to have those tangles. But which are associated with Alzheimer's. But there are so many other ways that people have, so many other associations that people have had, like just not reading very much, even being not very socially engaged.
Right.
So it's not a direct correlation, but it's enough.
But sometimes that can go hand in hand, the social engagement and like feeling, making the poor food choices, maybe feeling a little alone and down on yourself and then straying away from those things. I can see where that's all connected.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we're still trying to figure out the tangle of that. But, we see it also with Parkinson's, with the deficiency of dopamine production. And again, there just seems to be like, why is it that when you have this rates of diabetes and these conditions that there's an increase? But, we can't say it's causational at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So knowing that there's food companies, they're aware that people want to make some healthier choices. So great opportunity for them to make those healthy options, right? The juices, the bars and all that kind of stuff. So, and a lot of people turn to that for convenience. So I guess like, what are some tips or advice that you have for, like looking for the disguised?
The thing here is somebody's trying to, how can you make a profit on this? Like really the bottom line is we just need to eat more real food and less processed food, but there's no money in real food except farmers. And basically just try to avoid processed, like the simplest answer here is don't eat processed food. And if you have to, eat it very minimally. And if you think that you have to, ask yourself the question, why do I have to? So if it's because you're really poor, a sugary choice is a lot, like cereal is a lot cheaper than eating, oatmeal and blueberries and yogurt for breakfast. It is. You have to have a certain amount of a level of income to eat well. And then if you're really busy because you want to maintain that income, if you've got the extra income, I would say hire somebody to cook the real food for you because it requires a lot of chopping and preparing and all that sort of stuff. And if I don't have time to do that, I will hire somebody to do that for me, or I'll go to the store and I'll buy the stuff that's pre-chopped and pre-prepared. Not pre-prepared food, but the pre-prepared vegetables that I will then roast or microwave or whatever myself. But the simple solution is if you can afford it, avoid processed food. Processed food is cheap and it's very compelling. You just see it as this is a product that is benefiting the food industry, not you. And the healthier it is, the more likely it's benefiting you because you're getting closer to your own natural metabolism and the way that your body is meant to eat.
That's really key. And it's what's different in Kuwait is a lot of people actually do have that luxury to where they do have somebody preparing the food for them. But I think it just comes down to a little bit more communication and maybe some education there of like, this is what we want to stick to, or this is what's best.
So if that's the case, then, you have the choice of making a roasted vegetable dish versus a bread and pasta and full of syrupy food dish,
Totally.
Right? And the person who's used to having that second option will be going, oh, who wants the roasted vegetables when I could have this? I'm paying the person to make this. Why not? Just to know that after it only really honestly takes 3 or 4 weeks of not eating that stuff to actually really appreciate the first option. And then if you've got somebody to do that, you won't even notice the time change, that how much time it took her to prepare that stuff. You'll just notice that you're not eating the heavier foods anymore. You don't want them anymore. And lo and behold, 6 months later, your sugars are better and your cholesterol is better and your weight is down. It actually goes down like it's possible. And the good news is as long as you keep eating that first option, which you now love, this is the message of hope here. You will love this food. That weight that you're losing because you've switched over to the first one is actually going to stay off. It's not going to come back and bounce back, in 6
Right.
months.
I was gonna say, I had a client that kind of wanted to, start dabbling into this, wasn't really sure where to go. And French fries were like a staple at like every meal. I mean, in the homes, and it's being prepared, in home, and they're, fresh fries, we can say, but they're still, fried. But starting making that transition over to like, baked potato, and then slowly, no fries are being served. And it kind of took the rest of the family a little bit of time. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle too, is maybe one person is into it and the rest of the family is not. And then those temptations are kind of there. And there's that little struggle of, how do I get everybody on board with this?
Yeah. But can I tell you, I know I'm speaking to you, the converted, for people who are listening, that, a French fry, yes, it's delicious. But once you get the taste of that out of your mouth, which is about a 3 or 4 weeks, a crispy cauliflower with some oil and onion or something is up, or even
be just as good.
Like, that's delicious. It's way better than I remember of any French fry. So you're actually moving into a much more cook hate, like a heaven for cooks, like way more options that are just delightful and subtle and delicious. One of the things that's definitely in the American press is like, you're going to be deprived of these foods. I don't get to eat my shakes and French fries, but you're actually opening up to a whole new realm of food that actually will taste so much better.
Right. Getting creative. Yeah.
This is a message. If you eat real food again, it's a message of, because you're online with your hormones, and you're online with the way your body is meant to be. So you're going to be back to the weight that you should be, and you're going to be back to having the food tastes that are healthy for you, because that's how we're built.
Right.
We're manipulated out of it because of the external environment.
Right.
Like the person who's smoking cigarettes, you smoke, eventually you smoke just so that you don't feel bad, because you're in withdrawal and you're getting sicker and sicker and sicker. But when you quit, get past the withdrawal, it's like you get to reclaim the ability to breathe again, like you're saying it no longer happens, and feel better and all that stuff.
Right. Take a little bit of your freedom back. I think take some of the power away from those things.
And one of the things that you said earlier on was some of the lifestyle stuff that you yourself live, and I guess other people around you, like not sleeping enough. I mean, lack of sleep will promote some of these behaviors. I know we're going to talk about coffee shortly, and even cigarettes. It promotes these negative behaviors because lack of sleep is, again, not something the body does well with. And a person may feel they're fine on 4 or 5 hours of sleep, but they're compensating by these props of cigarette and of caffeine. But they're not actually fine. They're on props that are helping them keep them awake, which
masking
is actually making them sicker. Yeah. And ultimately, they can't enjoy good food because they're already kind of sick, and they need the extra punch, the extra wallop of refined food, again, as a prop to keep going.
In order to get through that, yeah. Like an ideal number of sleep, or what exactly, I guess, is happening. We know that the lack of sleep is not good for us, but do you know, like, what are we not giving the body a chance to process or do, like after a certain amount of time or within a certain amount of time?
Well, okay. So the ideal amount of sleep really depends on the person, but I mean, people will throw around the number of 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Some people need 9, some people can get away with 7. I think anything under 7, you create what we call a sleep debt. And, if you're doing 6, maybe 7 hours a night, you might be able to catch up on the weekend. If you can sleep in, you might be able to catch up on what we call your sleep debt. But if you're doing under that, you're becoming chronically sleep deprived. And sleep deprivation is, in an extreme form, is actually a form of torture. Like, it's actually physically very stressful. So if you're at 4 hours of sleep a night or 5, that's not torture, but it is stress. And what it's going to do is it's going to make you want to eat more sugar because you need to boost up. The stress itself is doing all sorts of damage. I mean, stress is meant to be this immediate help when there's danger, but over the long term, it just erodes the person's. It's like somebody who's running all the time. They're eventually going to, hurt their body.
That's the thing about stress. I think people get confused about is like the stress itself is an amazing feature that we do need access to. It's what's kept us alive. It keeps us adaptable, but it's the load that you get under that people people struggle to
and it's a super
differentiate.
big load. Like it makes you gain weight because the body's thinking, wow, I'm under a lot of stress. I better start saving my fuel for all this stress.
Exactly.
Gain weight. You get heart disease. Like the amount of adrenaline coursing through it's great in the short term, but it's not meant to be there for that long.
It's all protection. Yeah.
And then there's another chemical that's sort of like the chronic stress hormone, which is called cortisol. And cortisol, again, in medicine, is like an amazing drug that saves people's lives. If you give cortisol, like you inject it in the knee, or if you've got a super bad rash, it'll make the rash go away. I mean, it's an immune suppressant that can save your life. But if you're basically, when you're not sleeping, it's like you're taking a low dose amount of a stress hormone called prednisone or cortisol, which is suppressing your immune system, which means that you're going to get colds more often. You potentially could get cancer more quickly, all sorts of things, osteoporosis, all sorts of things that you don't want to be taking cortisol or prednisone long term. And cortisol is the body's version of prednisone, basically. And if you continue to do that over a long term, you're going to tax the body and basically age yourself much more quickly. So best thing to do is sleep well so that you don't put yourself into that state.
Yeah. I think where you talk about like the sleep debt, and I know something for myself too, when I felt the best is not letting myself get through the week and then, trying to catch up on the weekends, because then I would find it's just like, you kind of waste your whole day for, downtime or maybe to go do the things that you do enjoy. So just trying to keep that routine like daily and even through the weekends, like try to keep yourself on that schedule. I think where people feel so sluggish on a Monday is because they've, maybe stayed up later on the weekends and sleeping in longer. And then it's really hard to switch back into that Sunday, Monday vibe. Yeah.
And if I go now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the brain stuff for sleep. The other two things we know that are really important for sleep besides physical health is emotional health, like just the ability, you hear the term, I'm going to sleep on it. I'm upset, but I'm going to sleep on it. And you wake up the next morning and you feel a little bit better, because what's happened is the brain has, while you were sleeping, kind of recalibrated some of the negative emotions. It's through the process of dreaming and through the process of cleaning up debris of random thoughts here and there, that somehow mood gets better in the morning. So if you're chronically not sleeping, you're probably chronically grumpy.
Right. You're not giving your body a chance to, exactly what I said, like filter.
Recalibrate back to your own natural disposition, which might be grumpy anyway, but you're going to be even more.
Right.
And then the other really important thing is if I bet you anything that a person who's not sleeping well has got a bad memory, because sleep is really important for memory consolidation.
Alzheimer's, I think that's a big link as well. Yeah.
So if you find that you just have a really bad short-term memory, you're probably not sleeping enough, because there's actually a protein that's required to make memories more memorable, like long-term memory. And if you're not sleeping, you're not letting that process solidify.
Yep. I think there was a book, I can't remember now who wrote it. And I know it talked a little bit about, like, I think Teddy Roosevelt was also part of, what she was talking about in it. But basically, it was like at one point bragging about, how much work she could get done in a day on only like 3 or 4 hours of sleep. And I think with all the people that were mentioned that had this kind of lifestyle, all of them had developed Alzheimer's in their old age. Really? And so it's just I have to find the name of the book. I'll have to put it in the show notes, but it's really interesting to hear that.
Is it worth it to be a burst of excitement early on, and then you've got this Alzheimer's?
Right.
It's slow, steady.
Same. Yeah.
And,
so how about the caffeine? We want to get into the coffee fix.
So you had said in your earlier opening comments that you drink 10 cups of coffee a day. And it's interesting. You can get, again, caffeine, it comes from tea leaves, it comes from coffee beans, it comes from chocolate. Those are sort of like the three sources. And if you were to keep it within its context, it probably wouldn't be that damaging. But again, you take this chemical out of its context, and then the alert effect, the pleasant effect, because it does have a mood altering effect. It makes you feel a little happier anyway. But you take that out, and then you can, it causes the same kind of damage, the frying of receptors and overtaxing the system, like all the other stuff that we've talked about. And with caffeine, I think probably we can see that, like 1 to 3 cups a day may be okay, especially if it's early in the morning. Because, by the way, although the peak effect of coffee is within the first hour or two after you've had a coffee, and then you reach for another coffee. You probably did.
Yeah.
You were trying to maintain, because you're using it as a boost to keep you up at the super level that you were living at. But the actual effect of it, the long-term psychodynamic or psychokinetic effect of caffeine, is anywhere from 4 to 7 hours. So if you've had a coffee at 3 in the afternoon because you're still working until 5 or whatever,
Right.
You're still feeling the impact of that caffeine at 10 and 11 o'clock at night. And it sounds like you're saying people are going off for coffee shops then.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like 10 o'clock at night. It's like a nightclub outside of some coffee shops. I mean, there's lines and it's like a fashion show. It's it's a big social scene. Yeah.
Is decaf coffee part of that, or is that considered
kind of looked down upon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least there you could get away with, well, okay, at least I'm having something that has less caffeine in it.
Right. It's totally celebrated. Like, and I think just culture in general. And I even see it here in the States of, where coffee is really celebrated of like, don't talk to me until I've had my coffee, but first coffee, and it really just kind of blows it up. And over there we just did a talk. This is why I wanted to bring these things up, because we just did a talk with the American University in Kuwait with the students there. And Maddie had asked a question of, that student life, kind of going through college and was like, how many of you are sleeping, under 6 hours a night and, drinking a lot of coffee, and every single hand in the room went up. So it's like, it's a problem. And I think at that age too, we think we're just young enough to kind of get through it. And that when school is over, then that'll be over. And, or don't even know maybe how good we're supposed to feel, after that point.
That's the bottom line. You just hit it right there. You don't even know how good you're supposed to feel or how good you actually could feel.
Right.
If you weren't doing all that stuff, because it's like, oh my God, I know when I stopped eating sugar, it was like, I couldn't believe how much energy I had, because I didn't have the burst of energy every time I put something in my mouth, but I had just general energy living every day. Like, it's like I felt 10 years younger, but who knew? Because I've been living that way all that time. So
survival mode.
Who knew? Like, who knows how good you might actually feel? But anyway, all that coffee. So if we think about 1 to 3 as being okay for what the body can handle, it might not be okay for you because you're more susceptible. If a person is more anxious by disposition, probably 3 is too much. Maybe 1 is or they should go just with tea or something. But anyway, about 10 is considered, now we're getting into the sick, like we're going to get sick. Not necessarily now, but you're moving into the realm of, this is going to give me heart disease, or contribute to heart disease, contribute to obesity, contribute to respiratory, like all sorts of other issues. So I guess the magic number, sweet spot would be probably, to try to stop at 12 at like noon, have your 1 or 2 cups, and then switch over to something else like tea, which is at least half the amount of caffeine, or decaf, which is, I think, like 1/10 the amount. But the kinds of things that can happen, and, it's like, this is part of the who knew, is like it does increase the stress level. And so your central nerve, your adrenaline is up, and therefore your cortisol is up, but you're used to it. It artificially enhances mood. It affects dopamine. It also affects serotonin, which is the social neurochemical. So dopamine is the happy, it's exciting, I'm having a good time. And the serotonin is, I'm feeling connected and not alone. And
I've never heard anybody break those two down like that. I like that differentiation between the two, because I think we just assume them both as like happy hormones, but just kind of like, in terms of not touching on the social side of it. That is important.
The way that I like to distinguish those two, because I talk about them a lot with addiction, because essentially addiction is just taking that and enhancing it super big. But I talk about dopamine is the I want to buy, I want to talk, I want to do stuff. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the desire hormone. I want. And serotonin is the I have. I'm good. I'm chill.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And what a great place to have both of them. And caffeine, you a touch of both of them. And plus it gives you, like I said, a boost of adrenaline, and then overall the cortisol. Mm-hmm. So it has a mood altering effect for sure. But you mentioned, as so many people who drink coffee, including myself, mentioned, when you get up in the morning, you need that coffee before you can do anything, because you're, I don't want to say addicted, you become dependent to the need of it. You become dependent on it.
Yeah.
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 Addiction is a little bit more than dependence. It's when you start doing behaviors, feed the dependence, like
Right.
negative behaviors.
Right. Start looking for it. No, that's an amazing breakdown. I think for me, making that switch, I knew drinking 10 cups a day was not good, obviously. And it took me a while to even realize, because it's, like I said, you have that one in the morning and then you're at meetings and it's just there and you kind of don't even think about it after a while and everybody else is doing it. So it is very social in that way.
Yes.
But I think it was, once I got out of that work environment as well and started working, just kind of for myself. But I was pouring a cup in the morning and my stomach just kind of flipped in a weird way. And it was just like this big signal of like, no, like that was the best. I was just like, my stomach just said no. It was like, no more. And so I switched to green tea, which I didn't particularly enjoy at first. But the biggest thing that I found, if I drank a cup of water with lemon and salt, pink salt in the morning, that like I did not have a need for my coffee anymore, because it helps with the digestion, which people sometimes rely on coffee to help them with their digestion as well.
Yeah.
But it also kind of gave a little burst of energy. It helps kickstart, some major systems. So I don't know, do you have any insight on the citrus and pink salt combination?
No, but I like that idea. I mean, I like the idea of just citrus water, like orange or a little bit of lemon or something. And salt is a great idea, because especially if you're drinking a lot of water, to keep the electrolytes up. Exactly. I love Himalayan salt if that's what you're
Yep. Pink Himalayan salt.
I like that idea. But the thing that I think is, if we can make socially acceptable water, like you have the coffee all the time. It's like the coffee and the donuts are there all the time.
Right.
People will eat that stuff. But if you don't have it there, or you have, like I'm a real fan of carbonated water. You have a little bit of carbonated water. It tastes like a treat. It tastes like a pop. Yeah. It doesn't taste like, but it has that same feeling. Yeah. And what a great thing to have instead of coffee when you're having your meetings and your gatherings.
Yep.
Later on.
Yeah, I just had this talk with someone else too. They're like, I hate plain water. And I was like, well, put some, fruit in it, or make little fruit cubes and put those in there and flavor it up. There's a lot of ways to get creative with it to help curb that. So
like this.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else on the caffeine or anything that you wanted to touch on for the listeners?
No, I don't think so. But I mean, maybe just if somebody is thinking, I'd like to stop, again, there is a withdrawal, all of these things, because they do give us, like, they're bursts outside of our norm. And so we respond by, wow, I like this. And then you become dependent on it. And then when you stop, you're going to have withdrawal. And just to know that when you stop, that's not life forever. That's just life for the next, 7 days. Like,
it's just a snapshot. It's just,
exactly. Like caffeine is like, the withdrawal is probably at its worst on day 2 or 3. And then by day 7, it's done.
Right.
Similarly with smoking cigarettes, like, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, it's done.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes a few more months to get used to all the social things around it. Similarly with alcohol, like all of these things that devastate society across the world are actually, because I work in addictions, I see this. We have month-long programs because the month is enough for the actual withdrawal.
Right.
After that, it's living life without that in a society where everyone else is doing it. That's the ticket on how to quit. And that's going to be the same with the caffeine and the sugar. But if we can build small communities, like, I would imagine like this podcast is trying to do, of people who are educated and knowing and committed, more and more, there'll be more and more options of places where you can go, or just mindsets that it's not weird to not drink coffee or not eat sugar. It's just like, oh yeah, you're one of those people. It's like the way we see vegetarians in America now. It's become very acceptable, but still slightly different, but very acceptable, and actually becoming now, with the whole plant-based movement, more of a norm.
More options.
Sugar too.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, building a system of support, I think, is the most important thing. That's exactly what, this was about too. I think it's stuff that we've struggled with at one point or another, and just not kind of feeling like we were alone in that, but nobody is. And so if you build that little system of support, and you can start to create that social environment that is actually,
and then eventually it become the new norm. That's my goal.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much for coming back, Vera.
Thank you.
Hey. All right. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. You can also find us on Instagram at The Project Kuwait. Thank you, and join us next time.